So, what is the state of esports right now? Kind of what's the vibe of the scene? What's hot? What's not? Is it growing? Give us the lowdown.
Yeah, great question. I mean, the scene is struggling right now. They're calling it the esports winter, and a lot of that stems from a lot of the companies that were in existence back in 2019, 2020, 2021, that COVID era, where of dollars was being poured into esports through sponsorships and team sales and that type of stuff. That money's kind of dried up now, and they haven't made any other money since then. And so now everybody's starting to get laid off. A lot of the revenue numbers are dropping, and so it's struggling. Esports is definitely in a winter, but I think there's a lot of a light at the end of the tunnel, and we have grown quite a bit. So we're very excited on that. And so yeah, that's the current state of esports, I guess. Kind of grim, but but no, it definitely has a great future. I think gaming isn't going anywhere. I think everyone knows that. I think we just got to find a way to tie gaming and esports together.
Esports winter is a great sentence. But I want to ask why? Why is it going through this winter? And the reason I ask that is I'm personally not horribly familiar with esports. I do remember just a couple years ago, I learned that there were esports leagues in like junior high and high school. And I was like, what? I can go to school and play video games. Where was this when I was in high school? So I thought this is blowing up. And, gosh, I remember the old uh, Tanner, you probably played it too. Old game, really popular in Japan and Korea. It's a turn-based war strategy with aliens.
StarCraft.
Starcraft. That's the one.
StarCraft,
Yeah.
I
yeah.
remember that kind of being like the first competitive video game thing I ever saw in my life. But why this winter? Why do you think it's drying up a little bit?
Historically, esports has always been seen as like a marketing tool for games, and a lot of people forgot that when it came down to like COVID and so back in 1970 when the first esport happened, it was with an Atari game, and it was they brought it to a college. They were trying to promote their game, and so they had this tournament, and it was like $1,000 prize pool or something like that. But it got a lot of college students out, and so they recognized it would work as a marketing tool to get people out and do a competition. That model had never changed since the 70s. They've done the same thing. They've essentially created, a league around a specific game. So call it StarCraft, right? And then you spend a ton of time marketing that game and promoting that game and trying to get people to join into your community. But the problem was that they didn't own that community, and so essentially what you're doing is you're building someone else's business, and you're kind of assuming that you have a business, but essentially because StarCraft owns they own the game, right? I always liken it to real estate because that's where I came from, and this was kind of the thing that triggered for me on why I started the business. Going into it, I recognized like, okay, it's kind of like if I was to build a massive mansion on someone else's land. It's not mine, so it doesn't matter how big the mansion is. It doesn't matter how popular it is. It doesn't matter how many people like it. Eventually, if someone wants to pull that land out from under me, I have to move that mansion. And that's not to say that you can't move the mansion. It's more to say like when you do, there's going to be damage done. And that's kind of how it works in esports. You build this massive community on property that you don't own. It's someone else's intellectual property. And then eventually that person comes in and says, "Hey, you're not going to make $1 billion on my property. So I'm going to need a cut of that." And by then you've already built out. You can't build a business in anything and then have even 10% cut out from under you, right, of your revenue. And so when they're coming in and saying, "I want 50, 60, 70%," your business just can't sustain itself. And at the end of the day, who's going to run a better StarCraft tournament, me or StarCraft, right? And so they can always cut me out at any time. But again, they just kind of lost sight of that. A lot of times people liken esports to sports when it's actually closer to music than it is to sports. In music, I can't take Snoop Dogg's music and go make money off of it and sell tickets, and he doesn't get a cut. And you can't do that in gaming either. It's essentially the developer's artwork that you have to appreciate, and you have to understand that it is theirs, and you can't just do what you want with it. And just a lot of people forgot that. They thought, "Oh, I bought the game, so it's mine, and I can do tournaments, and I can build this community." And they weren't really thinking about the long game, and there was so much money lost over it. With billions and billions of dollars invested. I mean, one of the craziest ones was FaZe Clan. They had a valuation of $1.4 billion when they went public and raised a ton of money. And that company just sold for, I think, $10 million. So they
Ooh.
lost 99.9%, of
Wow.
the money. And that happened, I don't know, 3 years ago. So they blew through, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions, within a very, very short time. And that's, not including sponsorship money and all that. But at the end of the day, it's a zero sum game. A lot of the developers will tell you when they got into esports, they knew they weren't going to actually make money from esports, but they would promote their game and hopefully their game would sell and make money. And so, people forgot that, or they just ignored it and hoped that it would go away, I guess, or whatever. But when it was hot back in 2019 and I started this business, I was saying then, if you pull up an early podcast of me in 2019, I was saying the same thing. I said, "Oh, I know the money's great right now. I know there's a whole lot of it going around, but you keep doing it this way and you're going to lose it all. And here's why." So now I'm still saying the same thing. But now they've all lost their money. So I'm just buying up companies left and right that are cheap.
So traditionally, is it that tournaments and all those things would be put on by the publisher who created the game, or were there always like larger independent organizations who kind of did their own events?
Historically it was set up like, you're a developer, you've just developed this game, and I'm just a guy, and I'm like, hey, I can get 100 people playing your game, and you're gonna be like, oh, great, cool, do it for sure, okay, I'll even support you. Here's $100, right? And then I'm like, oh, I have 100,000 now, and you're like, oh, great, sure, right? Then I'm like, oh, I have 1 million, and I just made $50 million, and you're like, okay, we have a problem here, right? Like, I'm sorry, but that's not okay with me. And so, yeah, originally it was just a guy, right? But once they started cutting everybody out, now it is the publisher that runs. Pretty
Mm.
much every publisher runs their own esports tournaments, and so they've cut out pretty much all of the guys doing their own, and made it more of just a. It's less about community than it is about like profit and marketing.
Yeah, so you could see like one that's really hot and they're pushing it. I think of like Overwatch is probably
Hmm.
one of the best examples where
Hmm.
they had leagues and teams all
Yep.
across the country. They put an insane amount of money, and then
Yep.
once the game started to waver, it
Yep.
really all just kind of collapsed
Crumbled.
in
Yep.
on itself. Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
So Titus, you laid out a very compelling case for the rise and fall of esports. It
Yeah.
sounds like. So what's the catch? How did Ultimate Endgamers League (UEL) change? Because what you just described to me sounds like you should be concerned about your own business, but you
Yeah.
say you're succeeding in buying up other companies. So what's the difference between UEL and previous leagues?
So we actually focus on the gamer and gaming. So what we've done is we've taken a holistic approach to gaming, knowing that gaming's not going anywhere. Every game in history will live and die. Nobody's going to play the same game as their grandparents, just like nobody listens to the same music as their grandparents, right? It's super niche to do it, and it'll be super niche to play the same games that your parents or your grandparents did too, right? And so every game is a piece of art that will live and die. And so what we did, instead of creating a league around a single game, we created a league around gaming as a whole. So there's 5 competitive genres in gaming: fighting games, sports games, shooting games, racing games, and strategy games. We combined them all, put them all together, and hold a single competition where you're going to play across all 5 of those genres. And each game is only worth 1 point. So no game is more important than the other, no matter how popular, no matter how, doesn't matter to us. And you're going to play against against in all of those games across genre, and then whoever's the best gamer will win the most of those games. And so it's made it so that we don't rely on any game. If we change the games every 6 months, so every 6 months we change the games out, we put new ones in. Popularity of a game is irrelevant because our popularity can carry the game, not the other way around, right? The players are not there for a single game, so no developer can really stop us. I mean, I'm sorry, but you can't stop us at this
Yeah.
point. It's too late. Sorry. And because at the end of the day, right? There's one Call of Duty, right? But if you type in Call of Duty in Steam right now, there's 10,000 results, and all of those games are mimicking Call of Duty. And what do I care if my community doesn't care? Why would I? Right? So if I can still gain my community, if anything, I can grow my community even faster while not playing your super popular game, then what do I care, right? And so that's where it's like, the business allows us to be able to kind of pivot. If a game, is willing to work with us, we'll work with them. If, championship comes around and they're like, hey, you can't play my game. we're going to say, okay, and then we'll replace it with another game. It doesn't matter. It doesn't even, there's 33 different ones. It's just one of the games. It's not the most important game. It doesn't matter how big the game is. And so it's allowed us to pivot, kind of flip it on its head. Now we have 200,000 gamers that'll play anything. So if you're a developer and you just developed a game, I mean, bringing it back to music, if I have 200,000 listeners of music and they'll listen to anything I put in front of them, what's that worth to you, right? So now it's flipped, and the developers pay us. So we have all the gamers, and you want your game played. Well, you pay us, and we'll play your game. And so the developers pay the gamers to play the game, which has always been my dream. And so I'm very happy to say that I'm living that out now.
Yeah, I was really curious how you were going to monetize it because, again, the old thing would have been sponsorships, again, probably from the publisher
Yep.
in that way, but
Yep.
or event driven stuff where you're trying to get ticket sales to generate a
Yep.
lot of hype.
Yep.
It's a really neat play, kind of like a digital Iron Man or esports CrossFit games. How are you seeing the response from players? Usually, they niche into very specific games and try to really become the top player in that. If it's constantly changing up, are they really loving that? Has there been
Oh, it
pushback?
is the most fun. We have pro gamers joining our league all the time. We have FaZe Clan members joining our league. We have pros that have come out of these other industries. It's much more fun. No, there's no such thing as a gamer that plays one game. The average gamer plays 24 games a year. So realistically, not even the pros like playing the same game over and over. Like gamers like to game, and they don't want to get burnt out playing the same one. So this gives them the ability to discover new things and play new games. And so the players absolutely love it. The developer response has been great. Sponsors and advertisers make up less than 5% of our revenue. Ticket sales is in that same 5%. So 95% of our revenue comes from developers. Um, and so that's made it so that we can kind of grow in a sustainable way that allows us to be able to promote the players, pay the players, and play cool games. You know, doesn't matter how popular the game is. If we could find a really, really cool game, like this season, we have a game. It's the coolest. I don't know if you guys care, but I'm telling you, it's the cool. It's
Yeah.
called Midnight Ghost Hunt. Okay, nobody's heard of this game, so don't say you have, because nobody has. And essentially, what it is, because there's zero people playing it, but essentially, what it is you go in and there's five ghosts and five like ghostbusters, if you will. Okay, the ghosts start out and they go in, and you can do like a prop hunt basically, where the ghosts can take over different items and you have to figure out who they are. So you have a radar and you can try to get close, and you're like, oh, there's something in this room, right? And then your team is shooting all the objects to figure out which one of them is a ghost. Okay, and that happens for 5 minutes. But after the 5 minutes, the ghosts become like ultra powerful. So I know this isn't a gaming podcast, but still,
No,
it's
it's
it's,
all
it's
right.
just it's an example of one of those games where the dynamic completely shifts. The hunters become the hunted. The ghosts become super powerful at midnight. Then they have to escape, and you would have never played that game, right? Like the games have such a hard time breaking into the industry right now because there's I think it's 600 games developed a day now. 600 video games developed per day. There's 50,000 developed last year, right? So if you're a game, and only like five of them actually make it into this like the popularity. There were like five breakout games last year out of the 50,000. So your chances of actually getting purchased and played and are like slim to none, right? And so us giving them a platform and giving them the ability where we're doing all the research, we're finding cool games, and then we're bringing them on our platform also gives it's a win for the developers, it's a win for the gamers, it's a win for the viewers because it's much more entertaining. Um, and yeah, and it's a win for the venues that we work with too. So it's it's a win 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 win. Everybody's in enjoyment in this.
What a cool business concept. Now, Titus, can you share with us your personal journey to becoming the CEO of the UEL, and what inspired you to be like, you know what? Not only am I going to start an esports league, but I'm going to do it very different than anyone's ever done it. What
Yeah.
That's weird, and it's five. It's UEL's 5 years old, give or take, right?
Yes.
2019
Yep.
you
Five
started.
years. Yep.
So let's take me back to like 6 or 7 years. I don't know. Whenever you had
Sure.
this
Sure.
crazy idea, how did this come about?
So I've always been into gaming. And when I originally I was like playing a video game, and my wife was like, you should turn this into a business. And I've always like been like big into business. Like I did real estate development, and I was like buying and flipping houses and doing all kinds. I was just always into business. Created multiple businesses where I learned a lot, but they didn't necessarily go anywhere. And so when she said that, it just triggered something in me that like was like, oh wait, could this be a business? And then I started like I'm big on research, so I just started researching the heck out of the industry. And I actually went to University of Mary Washington Business School and asked them to do a research piece on gaming. And I didn't really know anything about esports. I didn't know it actually existed. And to be honest, I didn't know there was a world of competitive gaming at all. But what I knew is there was a lot of gamers. So when we started building it and the business plan, the Mary Washington Business School determined, the average gamer they said played 24 games a year, and I was like, I wonder if there's anything because we were building just an arcade. It was just going to be an arcade where people came in and played video games. But coming from real estate, I knew it's all about positioning. And in order to get people in, you have to understand who your competition is. And your competition is always where they are. We used to say in housing, it's their current house. Where they live now is your biggest competition because it's much easier to just not move, right? And it's the same in gaming. It's much easier to just stay in your basement than it is to go anywhere and do anything, right? And so if you have everything you need in your basement, then you're never going to go out. Well, I knew I had to create something if I was going to get people to keep coming out to the arcade. And so I was like, what if we created a competition? And I was like, I wonder if there's some style of competition that encompasses, the average gamer's game. So like 24 games a year, 2 games a month. I'm like, okay, I'll find something and then we'll do that. And the more research I did, the more I was like, oh my God, there's nobody doing this. There is zero people creating anything that has more than one game. And so I was like, I guess I'll create it myself. And so then I started researching like the NBA and how it was created, the NFL and UFC and MLB. And so I combined kind of all of those different rules because you know, when you think of like a lot of people think basketball is just a single thing or a single sport, when in reality it's like 100 different sports combined, and each one is like taking from the other. So like dribbling is its own kind of concept, and passing, and then shooting, and even running, and jumping, and these are all different skills, right? That you're kind of combining and doing all in one. And I think gaming is similar in that it's all the same skill. You use the same controller, right? You use the same keyboard. There's only so many combinations you can have with the same controller and the same keyboard. It's just different graphics and different rules, right? So gaming really is the same across everything. It's just different graphics, different rules, and different skills. And so when we started to think about that, we kind of combined it all, and then we created the wheel overnight, and the concept of how the game is played. Me and my wife did overnight, and it was like literally it's the same as it was when we created it that night. It hasn't really changed much since then, other than adding like a lot more rules in. But otherwise, it was like the main things were the wheel and the rotation. Rotation coming from baseball, and the wheel being like a roulette wheel that determines what game you're playing next over and over and over. And so yeah, and that was essentially the journey, um, or the easiest part of the journey, I'll say.
Yeah. So can you go a little bit deeper in like how everything's structured? You're talking about the wheel and all this. Paint me the actual like structure of everything, how it all works. If I tune in, what do I expect?
Sure. So let's say it's my team versus your team, Tanner, and we're getting ready to play each other. You're going to select up to 7 players. You can have as many players as you want, but up to 7 players that you're going to want to specialize in certain genres. You may want all 5 genres, but normally you'll want to like combine different, like maybe 2 shooters and a fighter and a sports or whatever. It's up to you. That's your strategy. But you get 7 of them, and then I pick my 7. We start the match. You get a 4-hour clock that starts. A roulette wheel spins. It lands on a game, and we play that game. There's 33 different games on the roulette wheel. We only play that game for about five to 8 minutes tops, right? And then you're moving on to the next game, and 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 you just keep going and going and going. And then at the end, one of us has scored more points than the other, and that is your winner at the 4-hour timer. If it's a tie, it goes into overtime, and you play one more game, and it's sudden death. Whoever wins that game wins. And so you never really know what you're going to play next. The rotations are done as like a baseball rotation, so you have to you have to play everybody before you can play the same person again. So you can pick anybody to go in, but once that person goes in, they can't play again until the rest of your rotation has gone. So you have to be really smart about who's going in and why and when, and and you don't know who I'm putting in and I don't know who you're putting in because we both find out at the same time. We input it into a system and then it gets displayed for everybody to see. And so there's a lot of like there's so much like crowd involvement that where it's traditional esports, you're watching the same game for like 2, 3, 4 hours, and you don't really get involved. You just kind of watch it, right? So there's nothing really to it. Whereas in every other sport, there always is some sort of involvement, whether it be like you see a timeout is called, or you see this person went in, or why are they pulling them, and all that stuff, right? With what we're doing, you get a lot more of that. You get to get involved. You see what game's coming next. You hope for what the next game is going to be. You know if this game comes and this team should win. Then when that team loses, everybody's confused. Who that person this team should put in, and then when you see them put someone else in, you're confused again. And then when that person wins, you're like, oh my god, that person's been practicing. Like so, there's so many like twists and turns throughout the match it's just crazy entertaining. Our last event we held Capital One Arena in DC at their District E venue, and it was absolutely crazy. It was our first like super live in person event in a sense where we invited others in. So it was the finals of season 8. Normally, we don't really do invites. We have it at our own arena, and we don't really bring anybody else. So we've never been able to see like how crazy it could get. But after doing that event, it was just like, holy cow, like that. It was wild, like absolutely a wild event. So, but yeah, it felt like a sport, right? So,
That's awesome. So, okay, so you told us about your most recent season 8 finals. Tell us about your very first. I want to understand where it started
yeah.
versus where it is today. Tell us about
So,
your very first competition in the UEL.
our first, like, we called it a preseason because I had no idea what I was doing. We had literally just created this concept. Nobody else understood what was going on either. So it was for $1,000, and Uh, I think we had 8 people show up, or maybe 9, and it was like teams of 3. It actually might have been 8, I think, because it was 3 teams of 3 and 1 team of 2. So, and yeah, it was like 8 people showed up. We had a draft that happened beforehand where they picked who they wanted on their team, and then we kind of just winged it. Like it was kind of like the rules. I didn't really have the rules done, so it was kind of because everything I've always kind of just kept in my head, which is terrible for an organized sport, right? So because that's just how I operate, and so it wasn't until I started, like, my COO is extremely organized, and now our company's extremely organized, and people think that's because of me. It's definitely not. It's because of him, 100%. But it was all just kind of in my head, just like, and so everybody's like, well, what do we do next? And I'm like, we're going to do this next, and then it was like, and so we were playing it by ear and just figuring it out. And, that first preseason was so fun. Everybody had such a good time that it was like, all right, let's do another preseason in like 2 to 3 weeks. And let's try and iron out all the things that we knew kind of didn't work this time. So we did another one. And then we had our official season 1, which had 14 people at it. So grew quite a bit there. And then it was 14 people, and it was for $10,000. And then yeah, from there I knew, like, after that first season, as like chaotic as it was, as like, I mean, it went super. It didn't go as planned, but I knew I had something. It was weird because nothing really. You had 14 people show up, but those 14 people, I didn't know any of them. You know what I mean? So it was 14 people that I never knew before this, and they all had so much fun, and it was so exciting, and it ended in an overtime, and like everybody just kind of it was so fun and so exciting that I was just like, I have something here. I don't know exactly what I have, but I definitely have something, and so I just decided to keep pushing.
Customer acquisition. So I understand on the gamer side, you have the events, you can get them, there's prize money. What strategies are you doing to build your audience?
Yep.
And where has it been successful in gaining viewership? And then where were some dead ends that really didn't pay off?
Yeah, so initially, we've spent about 20 grand in 5 years in advertising. So not a whole lot.
Mhm.
Um, and a lot of it's been like guerrilla tactics, basically, where we're super kind of under. It's funded, self-funded, right? So we're just kind of working our way through for a long time. Um, but I'd say initially the things that definitely didn't work were like my kind of like my ads like that were going on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, and I mean I probably like half of the budget was spent on of that 20 grand, like half of it was spent on those things that were just not fruitful at all. I mean, a lot of very important people to the company came from those. Um, so I'll say like I'm glad, I don't regret, spending that money, but I'll say that it was extremely like they just weren't done well. Looking back, it's hilarious to watch. If you ever want to see something funny, like go to like our first ad. It's like it's so bad, but but again, that got a lot of important people in the door. So, as in like people that are very important to the company now, like our chief construction officer and our COO, and he came from a bad ad. And so now the things that have worked now, I mean, we have a really good team, so it's a little bit different. But like our branding manager is absolutely amazing at like branding and advertising and like speaking to the audience. And so now, I mean, if we'll do like a social media influencer video for someone that does like gaming, and I mean we could spend $100 and we're gonna acquire like 100 people. So it's like it is extremely cheap to get people through the door, which is why for developers it's like right now they're paying $478 cost of acquisition. Like it's like 78 to $478 cost of acquisition. It's so bad. And that doesn't mean they're going to like their game. That just means, yeah, I'll try it. Fine. Okay, here you go. Um, so, if we can get them for $1, then we can sell them for, 8 to 10 or 20 or 40 or 50 and still save them 90%. So that's kind of on the business side, but
Mhm. Micro influencers are interesting. Can you go a little bit deeper into that? Because I'm starting to see that in all sorts of sectors right now, whether it's gaming or fashion or basically everywhere. So, what's your
yeah.
strategy?
Yeah, I mean, the micro influencers are like their their communities are pretty darn, loyal to them because they're following and listening because they like the person, not because that person's popular, right? And so we're finding anywhere under like 10,000 followers is like the sweet spot. And so we'll do something with people that have 1,000, all the way up to that 10,000 mark. It's not that we
Are you
won't.
just reaching out to them directly, or how are you finding them?
Um, Yeah, mostly like we'll do like you know, Fiverr. We'll pay somebody to find a list of all of the influencers that are under
Mhm.
X number and do this type of content. That way we can kind of just send out like an e-blast,
Mhm.
letting them know that who we are and what we're doing. And that's been super successful for us. That came from our chief marketing officer. Like we stole him from Candy Crush, and so he's like he's solid. He's super smart. Like and he definitely understands that world. And so that's kind of been his major push. Otherwise, I'd have just kept spending it on Facebook ads.
That's a really good tactic. I didn't think I'm a personal fan of Fiverr myself. I've used it many times, but I've never thought about it. Just creating super niche lists, targeted
Hmm.
lists. Ah, that's brilliant.
Yep.
Well played, sir.
Thank you.
Um, so so let's change shift direction a little bit. How does the UEL engage with its community? To ensure you're having a positive impact. And I want to hit on diversity as well. What does diversity in esports mean? So that's a two-part question. I
Sure,
apologize.
sure.
That's on me. So the first part, how do you engage with your community, and what is your community other than just gamers? Because that's a huge demographic.
Yeah, yeah. So we engage with our community in so many ways. I mean, we have a Discord where we're pretty much always putting out ways to engage, whether it be through like surveys or contests or just videos or fun like interviews with players. Um, but also like on during matches we're doing predictions where we'll give away like cash prizes if they can guess who's going to win the next game or what the next game might be. So it's like a trying to keep them engaged throughout. um, and on the like who is our community, I mean we're an extremely diverse community because if you think about it, like gaming can't well current esports, they call themselves diverse, but it's tough to be diverse when you're playing the same game. It's normally the same type of people, right? They have the same types of skills. And so where we shine is we can take a 2K player and introduce them to a StarCraft player. And now
Mm.
that not only do they appreciate the diversity, but they need the diversity in order to be able to teach each other and make sure that they can win in a competition. Because if I can't teach you to play 2K and you can't teach me to play StarCraft, we're going to lose. Those are two games that we have to be able to play and we have to be able to win, right? And so not only is diversity like shining, but it's like truly appreciated. Like you're different, and I love that about you because I need you, right? So our community is extremely diverse. We get gamers from all over, playing all different types of games, whether they be indie games or massive games. It doesn't matter. But we get a very eclectic group.
How much of your audience tunes in live to your events? And then what proportion of your views is like after the fact in VODs or short form content? How's that all break down?
Yeah, it is like 99% live. We have so the finals I think was like 31,000 viewers. But it was like all of that was pretty much live. I think now it might be at like 32 or something, on Twitch, but I think there was quite a bit on YouTube because I think there's probably about 400 more views that happened because YouTube we post after the fact,
Mhm.
so it's not live. Um, so I think it was at 400 or something last time I checked. So it was quite a bit afterwards. Um, but yeah, majority live.
So Twitch is kind of the main platform where you're seeing the most engagement, the most viewership, and everything like that.
Yeah, YouTube is definitely starting to catch up though, and that was always my goal. I actually think Twitch is a lot more niche than people like to think, but because there's only, I mean, there's 3 billion gamers in the world. There's I think 30 million on Twitch, 30 million total users on Twitch, right? So that's still super niche when you think about like it's not even 10%. It's like 1% of the gamers are on Twitch. So most of them are on YouTube and most of them are on Facebook and most of them are because YouTube and Facebook have, 2, 3 billion. And well, actually, I think it's closer to like 6 or 7 billion users on it. So it's like, how many of them are gamers? Probably a good 30, 40%. And so that's always been my target. I've never really cared to chase after Twitch like everybody else, but I'll take it.
So, you've had some interesting partnerships and collaborations. Can
Hmm.
you talk a little bit about some of those that have been pivotal to the UEL, such as NBA Draft Party, the Philadelphia Eagles,
Yeah,
Make a Wish Foundation? I need to know
yeah.
what is with those collaborations, and how do you guys help each other?
So our first ever collab was with the American Cancer Society, and that went really well. And essentially, it's like they want to get into gaming and find a way to do it well, and we were able to kind of make it fun and exciting and more about gaming than anything where the streamers could play against their viewers, and then if the streamer won, then the viewer had to donate like $5 and we would match it, right? And if the streamer won, I mean, I'm sorry, if the viewer won, then we would have to donate 10, right? And so it was like just a fun, like interactive, like kind of thing. Make a Wish was actually in partnership with the Philadelphia Eagles, where we had a bunch of kids from the hospital come in and they played against a lot of the Eagles players in a lot of different games, and we helped with like setting up and running that event. And I mean, one of my favorite partnerships. I have a lot of well, I have a couple favorites. One of my favorite partnerships is with the Virginia University Institute of Medicine. I think I'm probably messing that all up. VUIM, if you look it up. But essentially, they do like massage therapy and acupuncture and wellness therapy and stuff like that. And so they're like providing wellness and acupuncture and therapy to all of our players at no cost. And so it's like an added benefit to being a professional, which has always been my goal. If you were going to be a professional in anything, I'd want you to be treated and talked to like a professional and given the extra stuff like professionals. And so we have a partnership with a wellness drink as well called Sly. And we've been approached by tons of energy drinks. I've just never taken those deals because I just can't see myself. I don't sell anything I don't believe in. So I'm not going to sell something that I know is killing you. And so I've just kind of shied away from those partnerships. We did something with Red Bull, but it was at the finals, and it was a very like, you can come in, you can give away some Red Bull. Like, it wasn't something we advertised. We haven't talked about it. I don't think you'll see it anywhere on our site. Um, but um but yeah, and then another of my favorite, right, is our partnership with Surf Thing, which is our PC sponsor, and they're like, breaking into the esports world. But what they were able to do for us, and what was like so cool about them, because they're like the largest PC manufacturer for simulators, like golf simulators and racing simulators, that type of stuff. And so but what they were willing to do for us was put our players on the kind of main stage, like where instead of it being about the games, they made it about our players. And so you had like the game's titles, but with our players as the characters of that game, which I thought was just so cool. Like, most companies just won't do stuff like that because it's risky, and it's like, they don't. Some people don't know these players, so what good is it? But at the end of the day, you know it is showing the care for the actual people that are promoting you, and wanting to be a part of your community. And that's really what we're all about. Like, we care about our players. It's a player first environment. It's what we always say, and we've always meant that. And by player first, we mean like player first. Like, players are getting paid first, players are being taken care of first. Like, we're making sure that the players are, because that, I mean, that's our lifeblood. And we want to make sure they're taken care of. Doesn't mean they're always right, but it does mean that we're going to always put them first and take care of them.
So if we're deep into an esports winter, that means that there should be a spring coming. What kind of
Yeah.
trends, things are you kind of seeing? What excites you of what's coming forward?
Us, but also like, I think it's cool to see like some of the like great ideas that existed in the past and kind of like flopped when the money went away, that we can kind of take advantage of. And they were there where they're like kind of, they were doing it in a way. So there's companies that used to like promote like aim training and stuff like that, where you could essentially go in and train in specific games, even though you weren't playing that game. But if you think about that, it's like an obvious, like, okay, they're only there to practice to go to whatever the game is that they were trying to play, right? So it's not an end destination. It's more like you're just promoting a game still. So you're still doing the same thing, causing the same issue. But it's a great idea to have like these training simulators to showcase skills, right? And so
Hmm.
we've ended up like partnering with companies, and we're looking to buy some companies that are basically going to do skills training for us, where you can show what is your level, or what is your rank in precision, and what is your rank in pattern recognition, and what is your rank in memorization, and what is your rank in micro and macro economy, or slow strategy and fast paced strategy, right? These are all skills that are utilized in gaming. And so finding ways to showcase those skills, and give scores for those skills, so that people can understand like these skills actually translate in the real world. It's just we've never really talked about them in gaming.
I love that. So if I was going to say if but I'm a horrible example, I would make a garbage professional esports player. But if how can fans and aspiring gamers get involved with the UEL if this is something that they find interesting? And I think the spin on it of the player first is a big draw. So
Yeah.
how could people get involved and find out more information about UEL?
You can actually, so it's free to register. Always has been. Well, I guess season one it wasn't, but since season one, it's been free to register. And so you can go to our website, sign up for free. And we don't ask the players for money. We pay the players, right? As a professional, I've always kind of said that. Like, if you make it to the pros, you're not then cutting a check to the NBA, right? They're cutting checks to you, and so that's been the goal since the beginning. So you can register for free online. And then from there, you can compete in combines and skills challenges as well, and kind of set yourself up to get drafted. There's a draft every season, where there's going to be for season 10. That's the next season. It's over $1 million. We haven't announced the official amount, but it'll be over $1 million for that season. And then we're adding another 4 teams. We haven't announced that either, so these are 2 exclusives for you. Um, but yeah, so we'll have about 16 different teams that are drafting players. So you'll have another 80 spots or so available for people that are trying to get in. So if you want to get in, get in, join. make yourself known to the owners on Discord. It's super easy to find them. We have a page that just kind of shows who the owners are, who to contact, who your trainers would be, who the recruiters are for those teams. Um, and yeah, and then make yourself known. Start promoting yourself, putting yourself out there, and it's as easy as that. Like it's a clear, easy path to get in.
Well, Titus, love what you're doing. It's a super cool spin. It's super fun. It gets me back into the gaming, excited about the gaming world again,
Yeah.
which is probably a little dangerous. But yeah,
I know where
it's
you can play.
yeah, right. Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us. It's really, really cool. So, yeah, if you're listening, you make it all the way to the end, definitely go check it out. Check them out live because I imagine that's way, way better than trying to check out a past recording or just hunting around on YouTube. When is the next big event? I guess that should be the
Yeah,
thing that
so we
leads
have
out
our
of here.
draft on Sunday, so we'll be drafting the new players. Yep, that'll be at Capital One Arena again, and then so all the new players are coming in, and then I think August, last week in August is when the season begins. So you'll start seeing some pretty crazy matchups starting then.
Perfect.
I've got to say, Titus, I didn't really know what to expect coming in. I'm not just I play video games, but like nothing competitive. I've stopped playing online
Yeah,
because the teenagers kick my ass. Um, I'm gonna watch. I'm really intrigued by this. I think I like just like Tanner said, you took something that just skyrocketed back in 2020, and you saw something in it and shifted it, and you're still standing buying up these companies now, and that's super inspiring, super cool. And I'm gonna pay attention. I'll be watching UEL this year. Okay.
thank you.
But
Yeah, I
thank you so
appreciate
much
it.
for coming on, man. I really appreciate
No,
it.
thank you guys so much for having me. It's been fun.
All right. Well, perfect. And with that, we will see everybody next week. Bye bye.